Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm hoping you're having a good summer and that you're ready for a little bit of discourse with myself and Isaac Simpson, who is the founder and the head honcho over at the Will ad agency. He also runs the Carousel podcast, and he talks a lot with the dissident right, which is really not any one thing. It's a bunch of thinkers and artists and intellectuals who are concerned with the path that the elite are taking our institutions. And in this conversation, Isaac and I talk about the wedge issues within the dissident right, one of which is the Jewish question. He himself is half Jewish. There's a number of half Jewish or Jewish individuals who are in the DR, and yet just adjacent to the DR, there's a lot of anti-Semitic rhetoric. That phrase, anti-Semitic, is also something we take apart. We also just talk about America and where this hunky-dory country is headed. This was recorded before the events of the last couple of weeks, so we aren't really talking about assassination attempts or soft coups, if you are okay with that framing, and if you understood what I meant by coups. Anyways, you can find Isaac's work down there in the description. And if you enjoy this content and you want to see more of it, consider liking, subscribing, and donating via the tip jars below. Without further ado, here is Isaac Simpson. You know, that door behind you always makes me think that you're in some sort of like really casual private detective agency.
Well, what's great is that this building is that this
Yeah.
is this is
Yeah, I
in LA,
figured.
it's Pasadena, it was built in that era. Like this is
Yeah.
straight up like
Darshall Hammett.
Chinatown. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. This it literally is
Cool.
that building.
Do you have women coming in with like missing toes and stuff like that?
It's so funny you say that because yes, but not because we're in the private eye thing, but because now this entire building is filled with estheticians.
Oh.
So women are always like coming in here and like getting their faces burned off and stuff. Like it smells like burning flesh in here all the time. And like women are like walking out with like stuff on their face like
Huh.
constantly.
How does that affect you guys' creative process?
It's great, dude. It's we just
Yeah.
love seeing women burning
On the
women all the time. It
bleeding edge
helps.
of beauty. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the smell. Yeah. Yeah,
How's your
no.
show going?
Oh, the show's fine. Yeah, I mean, the show for me is really just like for fun. I mean, I don't like charge anything for it or anything like that. So it's great. I just had this guy Pete. It's funny who like really moves the needle, like when you have him on. And I just had this guy Pete Quinones on.
Hmm.
Do you know him?
No.
Yeah, so I had Pete Quinones, and he like he's very, very highly respected because he had he got tons more traffic than normal.
Huh.
So yeah.
What was the topic that you guys trounced?
I mean, I don't really have topics on mine.
Okay.
I just took shoot the shit, but I think we
So
ended up
it's
talking about, yeah.
purely his personality drove the viewership.
I think he just has a big following. So
Okay.
when I released it, like a lot of people are like, "Oh, you got Pete. You got Pete."
I'll have
I'm
to
sure
get
it'll be the
Pete.
same when I have you on. It'll drive.
You're already shilling your project. I
Yeah,
see.
I got my hat. My
Enjoyer.
hat on.
That's a
Yeah.
really good concept. How did you come up with that concept?
Well, I didn't. I didn't come up with the name, but we came up with the brand, not the actual name itself. The name itself was come up with by somebody else who is involved in it at an earlier stage. But I
Okay.
loved it. I mean, the second he said it to me, I was like, "Oh yeah, that's the name." Like,
In
that's definitely the
in
name.
in my super normie mind, brand and name are synonymous. What's the difference between brand and name?
Well, a brand is everything about,
The whole thing.
yeah, Coca-Cola is not just a name, right? It's a whole. You immediately see it in your head, you know what it stands for, you know what the
Okay.
words are, that's the brand.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. And what is the brand of Enjoyer?
Okay, well, it's local news. So it's bringing back local news. So if we remember the age of Village Voice, LA Weekly, that kind of grungy, hyper local
Mm,
culture news. Vice was that, for a while. I mean, Vice ended
yeah.
up becoming national, but they still did, they started as that and then they became bigger and then they still did locals, that kind of local stuff. I mean, if you see the state of local news now on the
Yeah.
state level or the city level, it's done. It's hugely corporate. The focus is national. They'll talk about it's basically like a blotter of crime and weather, and like crime, weather, and then like what Joe Biden is doing. It's like there's very little actual local cultural understanding or cultural news. I have a friend who runs another one of these things in Nashville called the Nashville Pamphleteer, and he just had a great tweet where he was like, "Bitcoin Magazine has been in Nashville for a decade." And it's like a huge deal, and no local paper has written anything about it that entire time. And it's like, and I think that I used to write for LA Weekly, and yeah, like I saw LA Weekly get destroyed, and it's like, yeah, just like local culture news is just gone. And so somebody needs to step in and fill that, and that's what
Okay.
Enjoyer is for Michigan. And
Yeah.
it could expand beyond that, but right now we're focusing on Michigan.
Just on Michigan. So
Yeah.
what I'm just throwing against the wall, what kind of the spaghetti that shoots out of my mind is that did these local news sources die because the attention fled elsewhere, or did they mess up somehow? Did they stop?
Well, so it's a confluence of factors, but the basic real reason is because digital media, an independent digital media source, cannot survive. The
Yes,
numbers do not work.
exactly.
Vice, the number one of them, couldn't pay the bills, right? They went totally bankrupt and they were valued at $0 because
Yeah,
they weren't worth anything because they couldn't make money. And the reason that you can't make money, this is getting kind of into the weeds, but
that's fine.
the reason you can't make money on digital media is because and this was not at all true in the print media era. 85% of all the money that is spent on digital media advertising goes to Google and Facebook because people read the headline, they go to YouTube, they are on search, just all the advertising money in that entire like pool, 85% goes to Google and Facebook. And then maybe another three or five, four goes to Twitter. So you're basically the whole pie is eaten. The whole pie of all that spend is eaten. You're left with 10%. And that's because, people just stay on the social platforms. They don't like spend all day on, it used to be you spent many hours on the New York Times or the LA Weekly, or, you read the entire thing on the way to work. So that attention's just missing, right? It's
Hmm.
it's on social. It's not on the platforms. So unless you can capture all of that, recapture all of that, it's very, very difficult to make the money work.
Hmm.
And so what ended up happening, but that didn't change the fact that there is still a massive demand for local news. It's just the market in the way it was couldn't satisfy it from advertising money. So that's why all these things died because they were just hemorrhaging. They don't make money. They don't, they're not profitable things. So therefore, you have giant holding companies that come in and they buy up a million of them, nationwide, and they're all filtering back to some hedge fund in New York, or political actors buy them for influence purposes. There's a lot of different things that happen to them, but basically what's lost is the quality and like the actual curiosity about your local the story that's happening right next door. We've already had one great viral reel on Michigan Enjoyer about Detroit that has like 160,000 views about and it's a take on Detroit that just there is nobody around that's going to give this type of like actually interesting cultural and
Yeah,
analytical take on where Detroit is at right now.
yeah, yeah.
And
So,
that's the take, just to so you know what I'm saying is
it,
Detroit is like an Airbnb-able city.
yeah, no, no, that reel, which I'll try to remember to link in the description, is very evocative. It's very story gritty. It
Right.
puts you there. So is part of the model to focus on Michigan And then every once in a while, something from Enjoyer brings in a bunch of people from outside, from all these other like layering.
Well, there's 10 million people in Michigan, you know. I mean, it's plenty enough of a market, you know. It's definitely big enough, you know, and it's an important state, obviously. And you
Is
know,
it?
I think
What's so important about
what's
Michigan?
so important about
I know that the women
Michigan?
are really pretty. That's all I know.
Well, Whitmer, you got Whitmer. It's a swing state. You got Detroit, which is kind of a, you know, very telling story of American decline, I
Hmm.
think.
Yeah.
So, you know, and it used to be one of the most populous cities. You know, it has more coastline than any city besides
Oh.
Alaska. It has more coastline even than California. So, you know, it's kind of
Yeah, but
it
what
definitely
kind of, what quality of coast are we talking
yeah,
about?
about lakes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I do think though that, you know, again, the focus is local. We're not
Yeah.
actually trying to make it go national. I think that's a little bit of we're trying to kind of reverse that. We're trying to get people to
Yeah.
like care. And you know better than anybody, during COVID, people realized like, oh, my governor can really mess with me
Yeah.
if she wants to. You know, my mayor, if they're taking their cues from the New York Times and not the local people, they can
Yeah.
totally screw me, you know?
Yeah.
So,
What about the curation of the writers? What kind of process is that? And
so
I
that's,
wonder
yeah,
like
that's a really,
if
really good
that's another
question.
ladder.
So a big problem in the, you know, in the sort of fake machine that is standing in for local news now is you either have just total crap like AI written stuff or, you know, just really, really low quality, or you have parachuters in who are like, oh, let's go talk about
Yeah,
those
Flint.
provincial people and they look at what they're
Yeah.
doing. Or you have people who really just want to move out of there and go work for the New York Times. So you have everybody whose focus is not there. But here is what, you know, my agency is staffed this way. The our biggest strength of the people of Twitter, you know, the people of Twitter, the Twitter, the tribe of Twitter, whatever you want to call it. Our biggest strength is talent because we have a massive pool of disaffected,
Yeah.
talented young men and women
Yeah.
who are
And
really sick
self-motivated.
of yeah, they're very self-motivated. They're really sick of working for the mainstream. And they're out there putting their flag up all day. They're saying, "Hey, this is what I'm doing in this place." And I got 1,000 followers. I got even less than that. But
Yeah.
you kind of look at their stuff and you're like, "Oh, you're cool." And then when you hit them up, they're ecstatic. They could not be happier to be part of something, that's like different than the mainstream. So
Hmm.
recruiting, yeah, and this is what I have kind of developed also again for my own company, Will. If you put the flag up there and say, "Hey, we're looking for talented, creative people in Michigan or any place," you will find people. It takes a little bit of work, but you got to kind of like, you got to burrow and look, and people will give you recommendations. But Twitter is absolutely amazing at that.
Okay. So you're just kind of trusting the market to you're working with the market. You're working with what's happening.
Well, you're working with this sort of self-selected population that is on Twitter, basically. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like, yeah, and it's great. That's like when people, the type of people that find their ways to Twitter.
Hmm.
It's very surprising how great they are, and also they're willing to, again, they're there for a reason. They wanna participate in something that's not just the job you would see on Glassdoor. They want to like do something different.
Hmm. What are the things that you're doing different?
What do you mean?
I don't know. Your agency, even your podcast. I know it's not like a serious undertaking, your podcast, but this is
Yeah.
where you kind of interact with what ideas you find interesting.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is one of your Benjamin Boyce those questions where you you really cut to the core. You cut to the core of me, Benjamin.
Oh
No, it's a good
no.
question. What I'm doing differently is, I've put my whole. I've taken the big bet. I've gone all in. I have. alienated myself fully from the mainstream.
Yeah.
I've done that intentionally. And yeah, my agency is works with, based brands and based people, and seeks to get our young talented people paid to do creative work versus not
Mm.
being paid.
Yeah.
That was the thing that I really lacked that I wish I had had was a way to tell the truth or at least to create things that were beautiful and non
Hmm. Overly
uh,
processed.
yeah, or yeah, right. To not have to hide so much of myself, right? To not have to constantly play this game of
Yeah.
this horrible game of like cramping myself into this little like I'm just a nice. Oh, let's hear about your Susie. Let's hear about your dog's birthday this weekend. I really wish I had been able to make money outside of that. Yeah, right. So I'm trying to provide people a group chat and a source of income where they can come and they can be whoever you know, they can say whatever they want. Literally, they can do whatever they want. They can be pissed. They can be kind of wild and creative. Like,
Huh.
absolutely no holds barred. Like, you want to have the most offensive idea you've ever had, like, by all means. Like, that's what the creative environment is to me. Whereas the current mainstream is like, you can't say anything. You can't even say the slightest like wrong thing. Your whole
Yeah.
job is kind of trying to not say anything wrong.
Yeah. All the lines, all the toes on all the lines.
Yeah.
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 Watching the kind of the meltdown of the mainstream over the last, I guess, since Biden got in. I mean, no, since Trump. Trump kind of triggered them, and then they really overplayed their hand. And then 2020 came along, and they just went completely nuts. So they got what they wanted, which was Joseph Biden. And then with the collapse of the fakeness surrounding him, they're all kind of starting to doing the kind of circular firing squad Mexican standoff with the truth. It's like, well, how do we tell the truth? Because we haven't been telling the truth. And you see on the other side with Elon Musk, these are really big events that I think have really significance with regard to the public discourse, with Elon Musk kind of freeing Twitter to allow for these dissident voices, even these grungy voices, these bad ideas to be propagated, so-called bad ideas, offensive ideas to be propagated. You see this kind of releasing of the tension, but then you see bad ideas are still bad ideas. Dangerous ideas, still kind of dangerous ideas. And when I got interested in exploring the so-called dissident right, you're like, oh, all these people with really interesting ideas, really interesting takes on breaking down power and showing things in a completely different way than I had seen them. And then just like one or two steps away, you got total Nazis. You just got total racist. Like, I watched. I'm like, okay, this racism stuff on a certain level, it's ironic to keep people who are in polite society out. There is some sort of firewall there, but then there's this other stuff that's not that. It's just absolute, it's just honest people being honest with that, and to a certain degree, they're kind of, I don't want to say vile. It's just kind of stupid. It's going back to these kind of really tribalistic lines that the woke kind of re-engineered. I'm bringing up a lot of stuff because there's this push and pull. There's this release of energy that people can say what they want to say, but then things are starting to mutate and go in all these different directions. I'm wondering what your take on kind of like where things are going or how things are shaping up. And
Yeah, so I wrote a couple pieces. One of them was in Tablet, which is ostensibly Jewish, and one of them I don't know why
oh,
said
I get it.
I don't know why I said ostensibly. You mean tablet because it's like the
Yeah, because you guys are always like
commandments?
taking all those Xanax,
Oh,
'cause
that's
your
why.
anxiety. No, it was the Ten Commandments.
That's anti-Semitic, Benjamin. I don't know where you get off. Uh, because Jews have poisoned the world with their pharmaceuticals. I mean, it's true to a degree. But yeah, I wrote one in Tablet and I wrote one in American Mind, kind of both about this. And it's about how TikTok, well, the prompting that people wanted me to write about was how TikTok is responsible for anti-Semitism, which I don't believe at all. But I sort of was trying to explain TikTok. And because remember, for about 5 seconds there after October 7th, there was this whole narrative that like TikTok is why people are anti-Semitic now. Yeah, that was like the explanation, right?
Okay,
Like,
not
yeah.
Columbia College, but TikTok.
Yes, it was TikTok. TikTok was to blame for
Okay.
widespread anti-Semitism amongst the youth, right? And so I was kind of trying to explain like why that effect has happened. And it's like to me it's a little bit of a like a generational divide. I think that the stories of the past that were sort of keeping people in line, like the Spielberg era stories, like the big boomer made, millennial consumed, like the big stories, like Amistad and,
Yeah.
Saving
Yeah.
Private Ryan and,
Yeah.
these like big good
Schindler's
guys.
List and
Yeah, Schindler's List, like the big good guys versus the big bad guys.
huh.
That was very dominant in culture for a long time. And those stories that we were telling, that narrative was, obviously like any cultural mythology kind of BS, right? I mean,
Self-serving.
like
Yeah.
not really real, but it was something that kind of kept people in line for a long time. That era is now over, and we're now in the era of the scroll. We're inside the phone
From the
now.
tablet to the scroll.
Yeah. Oh, there we go, dude. Well done, man. That was good. So, Dad, how did I not? I should have, man. I should have. That should have been the title.
You should hire me. I'm
I
good with
missed that.
with titles, if nothing
That was
else.
really good. So yeah, from the tablet to the scroll. Yeah.
So there's this fragmenting. So it's interesting because with Jonathan Haidt, just very basically, there's the James Lindsay kind of, we're going to deconstruct the cultural moment by showing this genealogy of Marxism and postmodernism and stuff like that. And I'm just using James Lindsay as a stand-in for a whole bunch of way of criticizing the cultural moment. And then you have the Jonathan Haidt.
Rufo's a little like that, true.
Yeah,
Right?
Rufo is kind of
yeah.
more mainstreamed than that, but you kind of show Coleman Hughes, John McWhorter, all those guys.
Yeah.
Then you have the Jonathan Haidt who says actually it's the way that technology is interacting with our brains. It kind of charting the devolution of society or the mutation of society due to technology. So what you are bringing up is in the media environment. One thing that you're just bringing up is the way that people consume media, the way that narratives are exchanged and then co-authored by the audience in a different way than they were in a previous film going era, TV watching era.
Yeah, I mean, mimetic, right? Mimesis is the art of our time, and that's totally different. As you're saying, it's participatory, it's fleeting. I mean, what's so amazing about this art of our time is that it's uncapturable. You can't really ever capture it and put it in a museum. I mean, you could put a bunch of BAP tweets in the museum, or you could put like, do you use TikTok or at all? Like, do you use?
No, I don't. I'm familiar with it, but I do not tend to
So
it.
there's these things called TikTok trends, and they are like so genius you can't even really like wrap your mind around how hilarious they are. So one of them, again, it's like it's so hard to even explain this without seeing it that it's like you really just need to see it.
Okay.
But there is one of them, which is the image is Sydney Sweeney crying in front of the mirror and kind of like she's trying to make herself smile and like apply her makeup, but she's like breaking down crying at the same time. So she's like it's as if she's about to go into a meeting and she's sobbing, but she's trying to make herself look happy,
Yeah.
And so what this is so ridiculous. What people have started doing is they put a caption that's her doing that. It's the video of her doing that. And then at the top it'll be like, my girlfriend when I'm practicing my Tony Soprano impression before meeting her family. And then they put a like they'll put a shower sound in the background, and they'll do like a fake Tony Soprano thing in the background. So they create this scene where it looks like she's sobbing and he's practicing his Tony Soprano thing in the shower. And it's like, it's so hilarious. It makes me laugh so hard. Like it's
Yeah.
so funny. But there are so many, like you can't really take it out of the environment and show that to people because it's so reliant and millions of people make their own versions of them, right? So it's not just one. It's like a video meme.
Okay.
And that's art in my opinion, and it's definitely art, and it's just but it's so hard to capture. It's sort of like nameless, like nobody really takes a lot of credit for it. It's kind of like the total opposite of the Spielberg tablet way, which was
Yeah.
really like one directional. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Sargon of Akkad, aka Carl Benjamin, released a video essay, I think it was just last week, about the cargo, why we will never have a good Star Wars show again. And he spoke about there's this cargo cult mentality where these people don't understand how this magic was made, how Star Wars, the original trilogy, was made, what captured the magic. They're taking all the emblems of it and kind of like the lightsabers and the word Jedi and the word Sith, and they're playing with the toys, but they don't know how the whole thing works. They're making a model airplane thinking that the airplane is going to bring them the cargo that it did during, this previous time. And I was just juxtaposing what you were saying with this irreproducibility of it. Like you can't capture it. You have to be there. You have to be of it. You have to be in it in order to understand how the magic is made. But you're also saying that the magic is contingent on the context of how the magic is being made and being memed and stuff like that. It's interesting because sometimes the Twitter preys upon TikTok because they're kind of cousins in a way. So you'll have a TikTok jump over to Twitter. You don't have people in Twitter making TikToks so much. I don't know if Elon's going to try to reproduce TikTok in the Twitter environment. I hope he doesn't, but you can see that
Vine,
they can
because
break.
Vine was actually
Vine
Twitter, yeah, at one point, right?
and
Or it
yeah,
was owned
a
by
while
the same.
ago.
It wasn't the same thing, but it was the same company or whatever,
Yeah.
right?
But
Yeah.
so when you have these ideas, these certain ideas interacting in this environment beyond the comedic or using the comedic, I'm just wondering what you think about that. Like what you think, how does propaganda propagate in those eras? And we can take in concept, which I think is an interesting concept. I have problems with the concept of it, even as a concept, but it's called anti-Semitism. It's a very interesting concept because it means something, but it's always, it's a proto-woke concept in my mind. It's a positioning of one's identity in a way to excuse them from criticism. That's how I've seen it used since World War II in the media. This is how it's been used, and it's very obviously used when you have this conflation of Jews with so-called Zionists, or like, the state of Israel with the people who built Israel and stuff like that. So you have this idea, and it's dangerous, because it's tied to all these very dangerous things that happened in the past, and it's dehumanizing, but you also see it being used to control you. And so I'm wondering, in your articles that you wrote, how does anti-Semitism as a concept, we can deconstruct that or not, interact with with these youth, with these new narrative building tools, and then the narratives that they are operating under? That's not a Spielbergian big good versus big
Yeah.
bad.
Right. You know why I think they chose anti-Semitism is because it has that snake S sound in it, like racism and misogyny. Like they love these snake sounds for things that are bad.
Huh.
Like it
Okay.
sounds like a snake, like it sounds evil, like misogyny and like
Okay. Yeah.
anti-Semitism, racism. That it's got that sound in it. And that's why nobody cares about being called homophobic because it like sounds fine. It's like
Transphobic.
that's whatever, it's
Yeah.
fine.
Huh.
And look, so I mean, yes, anti-Semitism is one of these old big bad guys, right? It's the hatred, that kind of this worked for a while. It's funny that it's being dislodged. I think it's being dislodged probably a lot more rapidly than it could have been. But I think we've basically gone from a world before October 7th, 2023. I am like Joe Biden.
We're all little
Where
Joe.
2023, where anti-Semitism was like the worst thing you could ever be, to now it's like on the left, it's fine. You can say, "Oh yeah, Jews control a ton of shit. Fuck them." That's like totally fine now.
Hmm.
That was 6 months of time that went from one to the other, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And so it's happening very, very rapidly. And I think that's because of technology. I think it's because things like the ADL way overplayed their hands,
hmm.
and they harassed people for way too long, and they just messed with too many people, and
Yeah,
they started taking up trans rights, which is like, wait a second, nobody deputized the ADL to take up trans rights. Like, what are you talking about? Like. So they basically way overplayed their hand, and what it's turning out to be is, oh, this was a paper tiger the entire time. Like, oh, I think people are
hmm.
still a lot more wary to be called racist than to be called anti-Semitic, and I think that's because one, Jews have so much power, and two, there's so few of Jews. There's like, this is what Jews always forget. They always think, oh, well, everybody really thinks it's bad to be anti Semitic now. Yeah, but they don't really care. They're not Jewish. They don't, if they are not actually themselves Jewish, they're not going to throw themselves under the bus for the Jews. And this is the lesson that the Jews have repeatedly learned over and over again. Even the Old Testament is in many ways about this. So right now we're basically at this nexus where for about 60 years, and for obviously good reason, people were very sensitive about this stuff, but that's ending. And it's
Yeah.
ending like extremely rapidly.
Yeah. Well, the notion of the protected class, it mutated from you can't judge people based on characteristics to you can't judge people with these characteristics, and
Right.
but that just doesn't play out. So somebody such as yourself, who's kind of waist deep, knee deep, neck deep in the dissonant right sphere, you speak with a lot of guys. It seems you play around with these based ideas.
Yeah.
But something really interesting that's happened in the last 6 months is you have this kind of right wing thing that's adjacent to Stormfront, either ironic or not so ironic Nazism, whatever that even means, and there's these layers of it that from the outside looking in, or for the people who want to control the conversation, it doesn't really map onto reality. Like, people aren't just racist; they have all these motivations going on, and they want certain things for their own group or whatever. But you kind of have this anti-Semitic stuff going on in the dissident right because they're allowed to be that way, partially that kind of foster that identity. But then you have these really big pillars, Lomez, Bap, Ren, turns out. These guys get doxxed. Ren, I think, turns out to be Jewish, raw egg
Is he?
nationalist. I
I
think it
thought
came out. Oh no, he's what's it? He's like a brown.
Yeah.
You
Well, I don't know what he looked kind of, he
yeah, kind
looked
of
perhaps Libyan, Algerian of some kind. But
yeah,
look, I don't know. I don't
yeah.
know what Ren's genealogy is. I do know, yeah, I think Lomez and Bap have been confirmed to be Mishlings. I think.
Mishlings.
Mishling.
Is that
It's
like a
actually funny
tire
because you
salesman
talk to
kind
a
of?
yeah, you talk to a Jewish rabbi, they've never heard this word because it's actually a Hitler word, but it means a half Jew. It
Oh,
means
okay. Well,
yeah.
mulatto, but I don't
Yes,
even know what
that's what
word
I
is
am.
going to get this
I'm a
canceled.
Mishling. I am
Okay.
myself a Mishling.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Well,
my
what do
mother's
you?
Jewish.
And then there's like, and then so then you have this guy Nick Fuentes, who I haven't really followed, but he's got a really powerful platform. He seems very fetty, seems very psyopy. He was saying a bunch of things on January 6th, and he didn't get touched at all while
Right. Yeah.
grannies
Yeah.
got arrested and stuff like that. So there's a lot of weird things going on around this stuff, but he's really going against the Jews, whatever that means. And Candace Owens is really playing around with these things, whatever that means, for whatever reason. What's your position in this? Like, what is the power or the fear or the danger of right wing anti-Semitism, or even from within the dissident right destabilizing by snapping back to some sort of racial purity politics and
Yeah.
upending the project of actually saving civilization, if that was the point all
Right.
along?
Well, so what I see as happening is there's a few of these wedge issues on the dissident right. Tranny, wedge issue. Jew, wedge issue. race, less of a wedge issue because most of them kind of agree on it. Women, wedge issue, right?
Mm.
So you have these identity issues that in our world, people fall on either side on. There's kind of two levels of or not two levels. There's many levels of being anti-Semitic on our side. The deepest level is where it's called like TRS. I was actually a guest on that podcast as a Jew a long time ago. I had no idea what I was getting involved in. But that's actually the first. That's the first time I heard about the ethno state. That's the first time I ever heard about this stuff. So, that's the Daily Show, Mike Enoch, these guys. And those guys are people who think we need to not violently, but we need to forcefully remove white people from Jews and other races and have like an ethno state, right? So that's that's basically as bad as it gets. Then you have the Fuentes people who are the groypers. And
do you know etymology of groyp?
Groyper, I think it's the name of that. It's like the fat frog, I think his name was Groyper. Okay. Yeah, I don't know how that name came up. But these guys go way back, man. I mean, Fuentes has been, there's a great documentary that you can't watch because it's still dealing with distribution. It's called The Dividers, and it's about like early era 4chan versus Shia LaBeouf. In the He Will Divide Us thing. It's so good. And Fuentes is in that. And this is like many years ago. Like Fuentes has been doing this stuff since he was like a really little kid.
Yeah.
And so, the evolution of this, I came to this way late. I don't know how it all happened. But now the groypers are like not as bad as they're the people who do America First PAC, AFPAC. They're not as bad as the TRS people. They're not like full on we need to put Jews in camps, Nazis. They're more like, we're just asking questions here, man. We're just asking questions, okay?
Yeah.
The problem with them is that I'm all for them asking questions, right? Like, I think that the solution to the JQ is talking about the JQ. I think it's good to talk about it, and it should be made fun of. All races should be made fun of. Jews, and the more power you have, this is a very commie thing for me to say, but if you have power, you should be made fun of.
With great power comes great, gesturicity.
Yeah, right. So the issue with them is that, and the thing that drives me slightly nuts is that they're wrong about a lot of shit. So, Fuentes is very, very smart. And he does this thing where he calls people Jews. He calls Lomez Jews. He brings it up constantly, which is kind of lame to begin with. It's not. Hitler almost never talked about the Jews publicly. He was talking about political issues, banking. He was much more interested in the policy. Whereas these guys are obsessed. You go to Fuentes's Telegram, it's just Jews, 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 Jews. Every single thing is about Jews, which I do think it's just sort of naive, and it's not really super productive, and it's just obsessive, and it's the problem is it's just not true. The groypers do this thing where they quote the Talmud all the time, and I really want to share with you this. There's a great Hopeed, the brazen head of Sylvester, had this great quote about he says. They're all like burning the Talmud and stuff. And so instead, they take the Talmud, and it's like 6 billion pages of Rabbi Shlomo arguing with Rabbi Chomstein over whose dick is bigger. It's like the Talmud is not something that you would quote as scripture in that way. It's like it's like a Platonic dialogue.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of weird stuff in there. You're at 99.9% of Jews have never opened a Talmud. They have no idea what it is. So they're always like taking some quote from the Talmud about like eating Gentile babies and being like, look, this is the Jews. This is what they're like doing behind the closed doors. And that is just completely untrue. Like no Jews are reading the Talmud. There's no secret Gentile baby eating. Like it's not, it's so off. It's just wrong, And so it's very frustrating because it's like, you see this stuff. I understand why these young men are angry. I understand why they don't want to be censored. I think it's good for them to ask questions. But by being censored, they've warped themselves into this like very silly perception of what Jews actually are. And it's not accurate,
Yeah.
So that.
So with those two groups, TRS, and I'm assuming you're using the initials because they probably spell out something that we don't want
No,
to
I think it's the
promulgate.
right stuff.
Oh,
I think that that's what TRS stands for. I
okay,
don't
I
know what
did.
what would it stand for.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, that's another brainstorm session. And then you have the Groypers, right? What kind of splash damage do they have? Like, is that even their purpose in a way? Is to stain?
Yeah, a lot. So this is what I'm dealing with now. I have, so since BAP and Lomez were doxxed, and everybody's turning out to be a Mishling, everybody's Jewish, Jewish, Jewish. A lot of the guys like in my space are like, what the fuck, man? Like, why is everybody Jewish? Why is everybody Jewish? And I get it. Like, I get their
Pattern
confusion.
recognition skills.
Yeah, you're right. I get their pattern recognition 100%. Sailor, turns out to be half. So like, I get it. I understand why they're frustrated about it, or why they're just like,
Well,
like
maybe
what the hell,
maybe the Ubermensch is going to be a Michelin though. Maybe
Yeah.
taking the Aryan and the Jewish stock and having them bump uglies is going to produce the future
Nietzsche
main
actually has an amazing quote about this very thing. Not about necessarily Jewish Michelings, but he does say that like the people responsible truly for bringing in the Ubermensch are going to be mixed race people. He says most mixed race people are bad, but a small selection.
Yeah,
of
the
them are
mutants.
good.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the blessed
right.
mutants. Yeah.
Yeah. So I like to think of myself as one of those. But no, the splash jam is just very bad, and it does start to convince people to get into these purity spirals, and it makes it very awkward for me, man, because it's like, if somebody's on the podcast with me and I drop I'm a Mishling, and then it's like gets kind of silent and weird, and they're
Really?
thinking, yeah, it does
So
happen.
people are starting to actually care about
Yeah, no, they
that.
do. They do care, and because they gussy them, or not gussy themselves up, but they, in their circles,
Yeah.
they talk about this stuff a lot, and so when they're faced with it, they're like, "Well, wait, whoa, why am I now promoting yet another Jewish guy who's going to end up turning on me in some way, right? Or he's going to
Okay.
end up exploiting me in some way, or something like that." And I guess what I want to say to people is like, I get that, and I see the same thing, man. I see the same thing. It makes me furious. You spent a decade early life checking, just like everybody else. Like I used to be obsessed with this too. But at the end of the day, I didn't get a benefit for being Jewish. I didn't get any special treatment. I did birthright, which was I got to do that for free. But that was it. I never got some special call. I never got some special loan. I didn't get some pamphlet or, like I just
Hmm.
arrived here the same as everybody else,
Okay.
and I
And
think that a
yeah.
lot of young men, a lot of young white non-Jewish men think I have no chance. I can't make it because I'm not Jewish. I'm not part of the tribe. I'll never get the leg up that I need to get. And
Hmm.
I'll say that the vast majority of the Jews that you're seeing out there also didn't get a leg up. They didn't get the secret phone call. I got nothing. I got zero.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I want to say that that's actually not, you're not, I would try to not think that just because you're not Jewish, you're not going to have a chance. That's not really true.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you look at what young men today are being subjected to, being the butt of all the jokes, being told that they have all the power
Yeah.
and all the fault, but none of the agency because nobody cares about them anymore. And then just adjacent to them is this other group of young white men, for all intents and purposes, the same genome except for a few, stray differences. It's easier to go after the person right next to you because you can't go after the longhouse, right? You
Yeah.
can't confront the blob, but you can confront the Jew, or at least the
Yeah.
specter of the Jew in your head.
Yes.
So
When you
it's a
can
really
say, yeah. Yeah. Go,
wonderful
sorry.
trick that the longhouse, so called, has played. It's
Yes.
like, okay, well, here you go, like divide and conquer all the way down.
Which is, and I totally agree with that. And I have matured into having the opinion that you have about this. That said, does that mean that therefore we should never discuss Jews? Like, does that mean we should never criticize Jews? And the second somebody criticizes a Jew, they're put in the anti-Semite box and
Yeah.
completely disregarded forever. No,
Yeah.
I don't think that that's true. I think
Yeah.
that Jews, as all people, are capable of accepting criticism. And, a little bit of criticism is attempting to, like, did you hear what happened with Thomas Massey?
No. Oh, no. What
Yeah.
happened?
So Massey is this great Tennessee congressman, and he's like the one cool congressman that exists. And he is, definitely not anti-Semitic in any way, but he sort of refused to play ball with AIPAC. He tells this story on Tucker Carlson. And AIPAC, the America-Israel Political Action Committee, they're just by standard protocol, they start running hit ads against him in effing Tennessee. It's like, dude, let the guy from Tennessee not care about a foreign country. Like, you're going to try to destroy the guy because of this. It's like that's so short-sighted. It's like, all right, you can do that for how long? You can do that for like a couple decades before before you alienate every single person over time. It's just like you're paying a debt. You're incurring a debt by trying to destroy people like that. And I feel like all those debts incur over time. And to try to make it, to try to not only silence people, but if they don't actively say what you want, to then destroy them, it's just so messed up. I mean, it's immoral, it's infuriating, it's wrong, and it's also really short-sighted,
I think they were trying to pass a bill to make specifically anti-Semitic speech illegal. Like that one. It's like, okay, why would you're not supposed to say that the Jews control the government, and there's a law that says like, okay, that's not going to backfire at all.
It's insane. The level of I mean, even if you're even forgetting all the moral stuff and the obvious destruction of the American fabric, just the stupidity of it. It's like you're going to be the most powerful group in the Western world and you're going to ban criticism of yourselves. That's just not workable. Like you're going to ban them for 5 seconds and then everybody's going to be so pissed. And there's not enough Jews demographically to support it. You're talking about controlling way too large a group of people.
Yeah.
They outlawed anti-Semitism in Weimar Germany. For decades, anti-Semitism was a crime in many places in Germany.
And that
obviously
backfire.
Did that work? Did
No.
it work? Obviously not. So,
Can I do a Benjamin Boyce pivot if you don't mind?
Of course. Oh, please, yes.
You said the words American fabric.
Yeah, sure.
What is that to you? What is the American fabric?
That's a very good question. So, the other side of me is WASP, Mayflower, we have the whole chart. And, I feel like the question you're asking is what is America, maybe? Like, what actually, is it a people? Is it a...
What is it? Yeah. I mean, what are we here
people?
defending? What are we here celebrating?
We actually care about?
And there's something about the right or the dissident right that does have an affinity for something American.
Oh, yeah. I would never, ever say something like America is an idea. I hate when people say it. What they actually mean is America is an economic zone in which I can, do whatever I want. Like, I hate when people say America's just an idea. Like, no. America is a nation, and but it's a nation that was built intentionally. It's like a Reuben sandwich, like the Reuben sandwich was... Somebody set off to make the great sandwich and they arrived at the Reuben. That's what they set off to make a great society, and this is what they came up with. But there was a bunch of white Christian guys reading the Bible and reading other things who created it, and that has to be honored, I think, in any part of it.
It's odd. I mean, you can't really, a lot of the problems with discourse, capital D, TM, is this inability for memes to not devolve over time. So in a certain respect, diversity is our strength. There's a lot of power in
Yeah,
the cross pollination,
totally.
and trying
Totally.
to go all the way with that. And they gutted that, and just made it a tool for power. The Democrats or the left have. The right, however's reaction to that is try to go to an ethno-national state and try to unplug ourselves from that experiment. Good luck. I mean, I understand if Europe wanted to do that, and even if they did, good luck with that at this point in time. But there's just this inability for people to, on the left and on the right, to kind of sit with these, like, reality not being able to be contained by different memes or even different statements or different axioms and stuff like that. And you look at America, it is just, diversity is really cool, you know? So how does it go forward? And from your point of view, what is the trajectory of the right, of the dissident right? Can it overcome this racial animus, and can it allow for racial difference to kind of work itself out?
Yeah, so I think that these are all really, really good questions, and I'm like right on the same page as seeing this in the same way as you are. I think that America should be able to accommodate white. If in my opinion is, if somebody wants to go create a white ethno state in America, they should be allowed to do that. You know, I don't think they should be blocked. You know, diversity is our strength. Forced diversity is the opposite of our strength, right?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
where America did become a communist state.
Yeah, freedom of
And
association.
and that's what it really comes down to for me, is freedom of assembly. Is That's the missing, forgotten thing. We because we live in, and that has a lot to do, I think, with the, as you said, that the other perspective, that it's actually all technology and there's this giant machine that's reducing people into these cogs. And I think that machine loves freedom of speech and hates freedom of association because it wants us atomized, right? It wants everybody atomized. It hates religion for that reason. So I think that the United States should be able to accommodate a white ethno state if that's what people want. The fact is, very few people are going to really want to live there. because what I was actually, one of the blessings of COVID is, and maybe you've talked to people on your podcast about this. Do you know people who during COVID moved to like what they thought like Kansas or, you know, some place like Tennessee, and then they just moved back? Like I know so many people
Really?
like that. That are like, oh, I'm coming back to LA. You know,
Oh, really?
Kansas
Okay.
didn't work out. Yeah, like,
Okay.
oh, I didn't. Yeah, I just had a guy, Walt Bismarck, on my podcast. He did it in Nebraska. The urge for cosmopolitanism that's time immemorial. You know, you got Zanzibar. You know, Zanzibar was an amazing, bustling place that was full of Indians and Arabs and blacks and, you know, a couple of whites, and people like that, man. People want the marketplace. They want to be in this.
Yeah.
They're drawn to that. The type of person that really actually wants to live in an ethno state, if you actually really do it, very few. There's a reason why there's only 5 million people in Denmark. Nobody actually wants to go live in Denmark. You know, like you don't actually really want it once you're actually confronted with it, you know? And so I think that the leaders of the dissident right, many of them have realized this. I still think there's a lot of ethno-stater type people in there. And my opinion is they should be allowed to take that. They should be allowed to do it. Now, as for the part of your question where you're saying what's going to happen to the dissident right, these wedge issues are lethal. You know, the JQ, the TQ, which, by the way, I'm guilty as anybody of fracturing things along the transgender line, because I do believe that is. I am a purity spiral when it comes to that issue.
Okay.
You know, I don't think we should like put transgender people in jail. But I personally think that is not a valid identity. You know, I don't think that, and I think that in interacting with it, you're opening up a dialectic that is destructive. So look, these are fracture lines that are real. Will we be able to get over those fracture lines and you know, have the impact that we want to have? I don't even think that that's like really a relevant question. No, I'm not saying it's not a relevant question. I just think it's like we're not going to have any control over that one way or another.
Okay.
Like probably what'll happen is parts of the DR are going to get sucked up into the establishment and they'll become the new outer party, as Moldbug calls it, right? The outer party, like the sort of consenting, like the Ben Shapiros who sit in the corner and they yell and they scream and they say, this isn't fair, this isn't fair. Like the meme that says, like, what if it was the other way around and it's on the grave of conservatism? It's like they're like saying, this is not fair. And then the left just does whatever it wants forever,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think some members, and you already see that happening, they're kind of getting like sucked up into that world. And, those people are paid well. But then you have people like doing the Tucker twist turn who's doing the opposite. He's saying, no, I'm not going to be outer party anymore. Like I'm trying to hit bone. I'm trying to draw blood, and
Okay.
that's what my project is. That's what Tucker is clearly doing. And I think that as we're seeing now, this left coalition, this is such a paper tiger, and so many people are drawing blood. What you're doing with the trans stuff and the COVID stuff, they're making so many mistakes and there's so many holes and they're kind of like lumbering and dying. I think they will die.
Yeah.
And I think that in those ashes, what will be set up? Will we want to have a dissident right culture system? Let's hope not, man. The last thing in the world I would ever want to see is let's turn on the TV and let me see like a dissident right sitcom, like that would be a nightmare. That would be the worst thing ever. But hopefully the dust will clear enough and there'll be enough money where we'll be able to have a little bit of like a kind of cool renaissance, And I think that that's the best that we can hope for before things go back into what I hope is America survives, these rules survive, this system we set up survives at least for another few hundred years, and then we'll deal with whatever bullshit we have to deal with then.
Well, part of the attractiveness of the dissident right, this is why Lomez was just so brilliant to do what he did with Passage Press, is that there's a lot of creative energy there.
Yeah.
And I saw I think it was a trailer for a Delicious Tacos, either a film or a book of his, and it was this guy, somebody's reading this thing, there's all this footage of a guy just riding down the street or driving down the street. It was really evocative of something, and this guy's like talking about like this discontent as a man, a eternal virgin man.
I know exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about the trailer that Asher Penn from Sex Mag made for the Delicious Tacos short film.
Sex Mag, okay. I didn't know Sex Mag. Okay, interesting.
He is not dissident right, but he is leftist.
Okay.
But yeah.
And
but
then
he loves tacos. And yeah.
Okay, but he loves tacos. So I guess tacos is the grand unifying centrist position here then. So we can all get on board with street tacos, yeah.
Anyways.
But so in the reel that you that I watched of your show, there was the similar kind of footage going down and just like casing through Detroit. There was a similar kind of aesthetic. There's something kind of edgy, something kind of glitchy going out in that. So there is this kind of aesthetic thing that's kind of banging around in your neck of the woods. I'm wondering what other things are going to, or what other kind of trends or toothy, creative, energetic objects or events are happening or about to happen, or that you want to see happen, you want to facilitate happening. I know you guys have these mask parties, and birthing parties that are not connected to Ayla at all. It's the opposite. It's the opposite of Ayla.
She's the come in the fluffer parties. That's yeah, sorry. Was that might not?
I don't know. No, I don't know who's going to be offended, but I know somebody cringed out there, so I was doing sympathetic cringe.
Yeah. what's going to happen with all these art experiments?
Yeah, I mean, there's
Um,
like pronatalism stuff.
yeah.
There's just a lot of different kind of ideas, and it's really funny because the mainstream slash leftish media is kind of trying to keep on vilifying things, and every time they vilify something, they're pointing to something interesting, but they just can't celebrate anything anymore. So they have to clutch pearls, and so you actually can see the devil inverting things by what it's denigrating and stuff. So I'm wondering.
I mean, it's astounding to me that the cultural regime even exists at all anymore. It's because it seems like my world has become so disconnected from it,
Okay.
and
And the
so much of
ecosystem is rich enough
yeah,
for you to have a creative life, have a
it is
just
now.
connect
You know, I
with
mean, it
people.
is now. You know, I think there was this whole series of articles that just went on American Mind that Spencer Clavin sort of sparked, which was the question of um, why there's no dissident right art or no right wing art establishment. And right wing, the people who fancy themselves culturally right wing love saying it's because the right has no taste, which was kind of what he was saying. I wrote a response to it that was called "Culture is not downstream from politics," and yeah, I mean, so many things are happening all at the same time, and it's very difficult to see which one of those things are technology, the scroll, the coming of the scroll, and
Yeah.
which of those things are political, which is the tolerance for woke stuff is just so low. Nobody wants to see it. Nobody, it's bad art. So I think all these forces are sort of converging on yeah, the development really of a new arts establishment that is, perhaps overtly right wing, where we see like Sound of Freedom, or, there's a great movie called Nefarious that's like a TV movie, but it's like a horror movie. And it's kind
So
of
like
like,
the devil is in a prison, is
yeah.
it that one?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did
Yeah.
you watch
And
it?
it's
Have you seen
great.
it? It was
I love
good.
it. I
Oh
love
yeah.
it. Well,
Okay.
because it's just interesting.
Okay.
It's TV movie quality, but the writing is addressing things that the left won't touch at all.
Okay.
And same thing with Sound of Freedom. Sound of Freedom works because it's touching this thing the left it's a story that needs to be told and the left won't touch it, right? So the left has become completely sclerotic. All the art establishment things are completely screwed. The demand to get out of it is so high. I think it's still a little bit underserved. I think right wing people like talking about making art more than actually making it. Um, but I think that it's happening, man, and I think that again, I'm hoping we're headed towards a
Yeah.
real renaissance where all this stuff, people like tacos and BAP really do become mainstream. I'm hoping stuff like Enjoyer, we can revive local
Yeah.
storytelling, local
Yeah.
journalism,
Well.
interest
Well.
in the local cultural sphere. Yeah, I mean, the best case scenario, there's a renaissance where all this stuff really hits. That said, we have a huge and hilarious problem, which is that the cultural sphere is now run by a longhouse managerial class of women that are not going to go away. They're not going to just be like, oh, I quit my job. Or you're not going to fire them. So what do you do with all those people? I mean, are they just going to not have jobs? Are those organizations, since they're not profitable, going to die? It's really tough to. It's. I think that how can you predict? I can't predict. All I
Yeah.
can focus on is making good stuff right now.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
all I can do.
So what's coming down the pike for you then? Good stuff.
Well, this enjoyer thing is there's going to be a lot of content here and a lot
It's
of great
already brimming with
Yeah.
content. Yeah.
So a lot of great Michigan stories. If you're a Michigander or even if you're just curious, check out enjoyer.com.
Michigan curious.
If you're Michigan curious, check it out. And yeah, that's pretty much everything I've been focusing on recently. My agency is still going. We have a few other clients, things that are coming out. I'm doing a lot of podcasting on the Carousel.
Yeah. What are you
But yeah,
covering on the carousel? What's shaping up over the past year? What are you describing?
Well, so I've worked to make Carousel a like shoot the shit cast.
Okay.
So I want it to be like almost like a comedy podcast. Like if you listen to like Shane Gillis's podcast, like they obviously come with nothing and they just kind of just let whatever bubbles out bubble out. I actually
Yeah.
have to work it's harder for me to do that than to try and like do the opposite. So I try and just let it like bubble up, like whatever bubbles up on that. I mean, I do like focusing on, my recent sort of throng of people have all been Christians. So they're the sort of Christian pilled, the Christ pilled group. A lot of them are Eastern Orthodox. That's kind of a big trend.
Yeah, it's a big trend.
Yeah.
What's
So
your
yeah,
stance on the Jesus question?
what do you mean? The other JQ.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Like,
Is he in your heart or not?
Good question. So I gotta be careful. My rabbi's
Uh-oh.
not gonna like. He's not gonna like how I answer this question. The one thing I will say about the religious practice of Judaism is it's actual real Judaism, not Reform Judaism, which is BS, which is what 80% of Jews are. But
Yeah.
what actual studying of the Torah with a real Hasidic or Chabad rabbi or Orthodox rabbi, when you actually learn about Judaism, it is a beautiful religion. It's about not gossiping. It's about taking good action. It's about being a good person. It really is about being a good person.
Yeah.
Like that is 100% what it
Well,
is
I mean,
about.
if Norm Macdonald was into it, it can't be all bad.
Was
That's my
he?
stance. Yeah. Yeah, he was.
Was he a Jew?
No, he studied under rabbis.
Yeah.
For some reason, he hung out with rabbis.
Yeah, it really is very, very fixated on being a good person, being connected with God, not being superficial. Like all of the rules of it are very good. But I will say the one thing you do see a lot of in the real practice of Judaism is no idols, right? No idols. You can't have something that's not God stand in for God. And
Okay.
so a lot of the anger, or not anger, but like distaste that religious Jews have for Christianity, it comes because they're triggered by making Jesus
Yeah.
a man, right?
Yeah. God.
Making a man into God is like the worst. That's
Yeah.
the worst thing you could possibly do, right? So that said, look, I've had religious experiences in churches. I had one in Hungary, in the church with the guy's dead hand, and I think there's a saint's hand, dead hand there. I don't know,
Hey,
but
man, whatever floats your boat. No, that's great.
and when I read the New Testament, it's impactful to me. I get it. I understand the power of it, and I like it. I like reading it. But I still do think I probably have a Jewish soul, and there's like nothing I can do about that. And so it's tough. It's tough. But I have the utmost respect for Christians, man, and I really don't, I don't at all view them as blasphemous in any way, personally. I mean, I think it's a man. I don't know. Are you religious?
Yeah. I mean, ostensibly, or
Yeah,
actually, in a way, yeah.
a little bit. I think a man needs religion. A man really you must have some religious practice as a man to anchor your life. And I don't think that's true of women. And I just think when I see a man that doesn't have that, they're susceptible to stuff that they shouldn't be. They're susceptible to being having a bad impact on the world. Whereas if you have even the most minimal religious practice, I think that
Keeps your horses in line.
Yes, it keeps your horses in line. And one thing I will say in support of Judaism, the big difference in the end times, and you can tell me if I'm wrong about this, but I think in the end times, if you're not a Christian, you're kind of out of luck. You're not going to the good place, right? If you don't accept Jesus. Whereas in Jewish end times, everybody goes to the same place. We all end up in paradise with God. Nobody has different. Nobody gets a better treatment. We're all just like subsumed by God's light, all at once. There's no And once we're there, like we're just
Yeah.
all flying around and
Yeah.
in the
Yeah,
light of God.
the end times as a principle, a spiritual principle, is constant and infinitely distant. It's always happening. We're always being judged and we're always being saved. In my according to my personal experience or whatever. So whoever makes it, I mean, good on them. If Christ is how you ascend that ladder or find that ladder or accept the ladder's help, then that's if Judaism does it. I don't think all religions are similar because there's truth and there's not truth, but there's images of there's a ladder. Grace is a ladder, kind of to riff off of what's his name from not Lord of the Rings, the other one, Game of Thrones.
Oh,
Chaos
yeah.
is a ladder.
Chaos is grace is a ladder. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. That's really good. Yeah, Littlefinger.
Littlefinger. Yeah.
Yeah, I once asked my wife which Game of Thrones character I was, and she said Littlefinger. And
Aw.
I didn't talk to her for like.
Wait, she wasn't talking about your little Brist
No,
member,
no,
was she? Okay.
no. I just mean like that would be funny if that was the joke. No, but she was like, "Yeah, you're most like him." I was like, "Oh, he's so unlikable," but whatever. I survived.
So, any things coming up this summer? I guess Enjoyer is the main thing to plug. I'm wondering anything coming up with Carousel or anything else that's really you're just aching to do in the next couple months.
Yeah, I mean, what I would suggest is everybody to check out the Enjoyer socials. We're really doing something actually quite cool. Where one, the website looks great. Two, we're turning all of our stories into threads and reels.
Okay.
And I don't think any media company besides maybe like the New Yorker has really figured out how to do this yet. And we're figuring it out. And it's very cool. So check out all the Enjoyer channels. That's what I would say primarily. This is a huge project.
What's a thread?
So that's really like,
I know a reel
what?
is on Instagram. What's a thread?
Yeah.
Is that on that?
A thread's on Twitter.
Okay. A Twitter
thread. You know, when
because
it's like
didn't
all the-
Zuckerberg try to make a Twitter
Oh
clone
yeah,
called
his
Threads?
thing is called Threads. Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. Yeah, that's
So I'm just
correct.
making sure,
But
okay.
a Twitter thread is what I'm talking about. And
Okay.
so we're kind of trying to make this local media thing work. So that, and it's just been so big. So that's what I would say. Check that out,
Fun.
or just follow the Carousel podcast. It's still coming. Should be doing more writing of my own, but it's just been so busy.
Do you have a place where your writing's found, or you just like you disseminate it through all your different Jewish Connection magazines?
It's called The Protocols of Zion. Maybe you've heard of it?
No, I'm not allowed.
Constantly being updated. No. I mean, on the Carousel is my blog. I mean, that's my Substack, and that's where all my writing goes. Oh, I had a piece in the Blaze recently about called "Hurt People" that many people really liked. I would check that out. But yeah, all this stuff goes on the Carousel and on Twitter, so you can follow me, Disgraced Propagandist, out there.
Excellent. Isaac, always a pleasure. Thanks for returning to the show. Thanks for your time. Good
Thank you,
discourse here.
Benjamin.
Absolutely.
Great to see you.
My pleasure.